You know that feeling when you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, replaying a conversation from 5 years ago? Or when you scroll through social media and suddenly feel like everyone else has their life figured out except you? Or when you know exactly what you should do to improve your life, but somehow you just don't do it? What if I told you that all of these experiences are symptoms of the same phenomenon? A psychological trap so common, so universal, that almost every single person in this room right now is caught in it. And the most terrifying part? Most of us don't even know it exists. I'm a psychologist, and I've spent the last 15 years studying why intelligent, capable people remain stuck in patterns that hurt them. And what I've discovered has fundamentally changed how I understand the human mind. Let me start with a story. 3 years ago, a woman named Sarah came into my office. She was a successful lawyer, brilliant mind, respected by her peers, but she told me something that broke my heart. She said, "I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Every morning I wake up and put on a mask. I go to work, I smile, I perform, but inside I feel nothing. I don't even know who I am anymore." Now, you might think Sarah's case was unique. A high-pressure career, perhaps some trauma, maybe depression. But here's what shocked me. Over the next few months, I heard virtually the same words from a teacher, a stay-at-home parent, a college student, a retired engineer, and a teenage athlete. Different lives, different circumstances, identical feeling. This pattern led me to ask a fundamental question. What if the biggest prison we face isn't out there in the world, but in here, inside our own minds? And what if the bars of this prison are made of something we can't see, can't touch, but that controls almost everything we do? I call this the narrative prison. Here's how it works. From the moment you're born, your brain starts constructing a story about who you are. It takes every experience, every interaction, every success and failure, and weaves them into a narrative. I'm the smart one. I'm not good at sports. I'm shy. I'm the responsible one. I'm damaged. I'm not creative. These narratives start innocently enough. Maybe a teacher once said you were good at math, so you became the math person. Maybe you failed at something once and you decided, I'm not the type of person who can do that. Maybe your family assigned you a role and you've been playing it ever since. But here's the critical part that most people miss. These narratives, these stories we tell ourselves, they don't just describe who we are, they actively create who we become. Let me explain with some groundbreaking research. In the 1960s, psychologist Robert Rosenthal conducted an experiment that would change education forever. He went into an elementary school and randomly selected students. Then he told the teachers that these particular students were intellectual bloomers who would show remarkable progress that year. There was nothing special about these kids. They were chosen completely at random. But by the end of the year, these randomly selected students showed significantly greater gains in IQ than their peers. Why? Because the teachers' expectations created a self-fulfilling prophecy. They treated these students differently, gave them more attention, more encouragement, more challenging work, and the students rose to meet those expectations. Now, imagine this. If a teacher's narrative about a student can change that student's actual intelligence, what do you think your narrative about yourself is doing to your life? Every single day, you're running an experiment on yourself, and the hypothesis is the story you believe about who you are. If you believe you're not creative, you won't notice creative ideas when they appear. If you believe you're socially awkward, you'll interpret neutral interactions as confirmation of your awkwardness. If you believe you're not the type of person who exercises, you'll find 1,000 reasons why today isn't the right day to start. Your narrative doesn't just predict your behavior, it creates it. But here's where it gets really interesting and really dangerous. Our brains have a feature called confirmation bias. Once we adopt a belief about ourselves, our brain becomes a heat-seeking missile for evidence that confirms it. We notice things that support our story and ignore things that contradict it. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine two people who both give a presentation at work that goes moderately well. Some parts were great, some parts were okay, one or two moments were awkward. Person A has a narrative that says, I'm competent and capable. They walk away thinking, that went pretty well. Those couple awkward moments are things I can improve for next time. Person B has a narrative that says, I'm not good at public speaking. They walk away thinking, I knew it. I'm terrible at this. Did you see how I stumbled over those words? Everyone probably thought I was incompetent. Same presentation, different narratives, completely different psychological experiences. And here's the kicker. Person B will likely avoid doing presentations in the future, ensuring they never get better. Person A will volunteer for more, ensuring they improve. The narrative becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is the invisible prison. The bars are made of stories, and we are both the prisoner and the guard. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but some of these narratives are true, right? I mean, I really am not good at math. I really am shy. These aren't just stories, they're facts about me. And this is the most dangerous misconception of all. Here's what neuroscience has taught us in the last 2 decades. Your brain is not fixed. It's not hardwired. It's plastic, meaning it physically changes based on your experiences and behaviors. Every time you practice something, your brain literally rewires itself to get better at it. Every time you avoid something, those neural pathways weaken. Who you are today is not who you have to be tomorrow, but your narrative tells you otherwise. Let me share another story. A man named John came to see me for anxiety. Successful businessman, family man, but crippling social anxiety. He told me he'd always been this way, ever since he was a kid. It's just who I am, he said. We started digging into his history. When he was 7 years old, he gave a presentation in class and forgot his lines. Kids laughed. The teachers seemed disappointed. And in that moment, 7-year-old John made a decision. He created a narrative. I'm bad at speaking in front of people. Public situations are dangerous for me. For 38 years, John had been living according to a decision made by a 7-year-old child. Think about that. Would you let a 7-year-old make your financial decisions, choose your career, decide who you marry? Of course not. But we let the narratives formed by our younger selves control our entire lives. And we don't even realize we're doing it. So, how do we escape this invisible prison? How do we break free from narratives that no longer serve us? The first step is awareness. You cannot change what you cannot see. Start paying attention to the stories you tell yourself. Listen to your internal dialogue. Notice when you say things like, I'm just not a morning person, or I'm terrible with names, or I could never do that. These aren't objective truths. They're narratives, and narratives can be rewritten. The second step is to question your narratives. Ask yourself, where did this story come from? Is it based on one experience or many? Is it actually true, or is it just something I've repeated so many times that it feels true? And most importantly, is this narrative serving me, or is it holding me back? Here's a powerful exercise I give my clients. Take a narrative you have about yourself, something you believe deeply. Now imagine you had to argue the opposite in court. What evidence would you present? I guarantee you, if you look honestly, you'll find evidence that contradicts almost any limiting narrative you hold. The third step, and this is the hardest, is to take action that contradicts your narrative. Because here's the secret, you cannot think your way out of the narrative prison. You have to act your way out. Your brain doesn't change because you decided to change. It changes because you behaved differently. You don't become confident and then take brave actions. You take brave actions and confidence emerges as a result. If your narrative says, I'm not a runner, and you want to change that, you don't start by convincing yourself you're a runner. You put on shoes and run, even if it's just for 60 seconds, even if it feels fake. Because every time you act in contradiction to your narrative, you weaken its hold on you. Let me tell you what happened to Sarah, the lawyer I mentioned at the beginning. We spent months identifying the narratives she'd built. I have to be perfect. My worth comes from achievement. Showing vulnerability is weakness. I don't deserve to pursue what makes me happy. Each of these narratives had an origin story, a moment in childhood or adolescence where she made a decision about who she needed to be to stay safe, to be loved, to be accepted.
And slowly, carefully, we began to challenge these narratives, not just intellectually, but through action. She started saying no to projects that didn't align with her values. She began sharing her real feelings with her partner. She took an improv class, something that terrified her because it required being imperfect in front of others. It wasn't easy. There was setbacks, moments of doubt, times when the old narrative screamed at her to go back to safety. But 6 months later, she sent me a message I'll never forget. She said, "I finally feel like I'm living my own life. Not the life I thought I was supposed to live, my life." That's what's on the other side of the narrative prison. Freedom, authenticity, the ability to write your own story instead of being written by stories you didn't choose. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying that all narratives are bad. Some narratives serve us beautifully. I'm resilient. I'm someone who learns from mistakes. I'm capable of growth. These narratives open doors instead of closing them. The question isn't whether to have narratives. We're narrative creatures. We can't help but create stories. The question is, are your narratives empowering you or imprisoning you? And here's the beautiful, terrifying truth. You get to choose. Not easily, not instantly, but gradually, through awareness and intentional action, you can become the author of your own story instead of a character trapped in someone else's script. Think about the narrative prison in your own life right now. What story have you been telling yourself about who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve? Where did that story come from? Is it still true? Is it serving you? And if the answer is no, what would happen if you started writing a different story? Not someday, not when you feel ready, not when the circumstances are perfect, today. Because here's what I've learned after 15 years of doing this work. The people who transform their lives aren't the ones with the most advantages or the least trauma or the best circumstances. They're the ones who realize that the biggest obstacle between them and the life they want isn't out there. It's the story they're telling themselves. And stories, my friends, can always be rewritten. The prison door has always been unlocked. The question is, are you ready to walk through it?